December 10th, 2008. Your penthouse apartment, East 64th Street, Manhattan. The light coming through the tall windows is the color of pewter, flat, winter light, the kind that erases shadows and makes everything look like it's already a memory. The city is out there, 30 floors below your life, doing what it always does. Moving, dealing, believing. Inside this room, the air is completely still. Your sons are sitting across from you. Andrew is 44 years old. Mark is 42. They came because you called and asked them to come, the way you have always called and always asked. And they have always come because that is the contract inside a family like yours, the unspoken covenant that runs deeper than any legal document you have ever signed. They sit with the posture of men who grew up around confidence. Shoulders easy, eyes expecting a business discussion. They work on the 18th floor, the legitimate floor, the one you always kept them on, carefully, deliberately, like a man who built a firewall not to protect himself, but to protect the people he loves most. They do not know. In 11 hours, FBI agents Theodore Cassioppi and BJ Coons will be standing at this same door. But right now, in this gray December light, it is only the three of you. And for one suspended, crystalline, terrible second, you are still Bernard L. Madoff, the name on the wall, the chairman, the patriarch, the man who built an empire from $5,000 and the hunger of a kid from Queens who refused to stay small. Then you open your mouth, and 70 years of construction become rubble in a sentence. It's all one big lie. You watch their faces. You watch the light drain out. And you understand, in that moment, that the worst thing you ever stole was not money. But to understand how you end up in this room, how a man who helped build the modern architecture of American markets ends up watching his sons look at him like a stranger, we have to go back. All the way back to Queens. Laurelton, Queens, 1950s. You're not from money. Hold that. Because when the world finally processes what you've done, the assumption will be that you were always inside the establishment, born to it, handed the keys, an insider from birth. That is not your story. Your story is the other story, the American one, the one about hunger. Your father, Ralph, works in the plumbing supply business. Your mother, Sylvia, briefly tries running a brokerage firm out of the house, takes registrations from neighborhood clients, operates without the proper filings. The SEC finds out. They shut it down for failing to report financial records. You're a teenager when this happens. You watch the government arrive at your mother's operation and close it. You file it away, not as a warning, but as information. Systems can be worked. Regulators can be navigated. What matters is understanding the mechanism. You go to Far Rockaway High School. You go to Hofstra University. You try a year of law school at Brooklyn Law, and then you stop because you can already see the shape of where you're going, and it does not require a degree. It requires something else entirely. Nerve, instinct, the ability to walk into a room of wealthy people and make them feel that letting you manage their money is the greatest favor they could do for themselves. In 1960, you were 22 years old. You have $5,000, earned lifeguarding on Long Island beaches and installing lawn sprinklers on the weekends. You take that $5,000 and you open Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities, LLC. A desk, a phone, your father-in-law's Rolodex. Saul Alpern is a legitimate accountant with a legitimate client base, doctors, lawyers, middle-class savers who trust in the way people used to trust their accountants, completely and without audit. Saul introduces you around. His clients become your clients. Their money starts small, and you invest it carefully, and you generate modest returns, and they're satisfied and you're building something. For a long time, longer than anyone later gives you credit for, what you build is real. You are a genuine pioneer of electronic trading in an era when most trades still happen by hand, scrawled on slips of paper and shouted across floors. You see the future of markets before most people on Wall Street can even name it. You help found the infrastructure that becomes the NASDAQ Stock Exchange, the electronic market that will eventually reshape American capitalism. You're not a fraud. Not yet. You're a builder. By the 1980s, Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities is processing somewhere between 5 and 10% of the daily order flow on the New York Stock Exchange. Billion-dollar banks are calling your office. Regulators consult you. In 1990, the industry formally recognizes what you've become. They make you chairman of NASDAQ. You serve the role again in 1991, and again in 1993. Read that again. The man who will be sentenced to 150 years in federal prison once served as chairman of the second largest stock exchange in the United States of America. You did not break into the system. You helped build it. And that is the thing that will make what comes next so complete in its devastation. This is not the story of an outsider running a con. This is the story of the most trusted man in the room. But you don't know that yet. On the day you made the choice that changed everything, you told yourself it was just a bridge, just a temporary measure, just the kind of thing smart men do in a tight quarter. You had no idea you had just signed your own sentence. The 17th floor is different. The 18th and 19th floors of the Lipstick Building, 885 3rd Avenue, Midtown Manhattan, run a legitimate market-making and proprietary trading operation. Traders, technology, real transactions, real money moving through real markets. The legitimate world. The 17th floor is the investment advisory business. Up here, the chosen clients come, the wealthy ones, the well-connected, the people who got a call from someone who knows someone who reached out because they heard that access to Madoff's fund was nearly impossible to get, which made everyone want it more. That's how exclusivity works. That is how you designed it to work. You run what you call a split-strike conversion strategy, an options-based approach involving S&P 100 stocks hedged with index puts. It sounds technical enough that most clients don't probe it. Those who ask for more are given more words that sound like answers. You've spent 30 years learning how to speak the language of confidence. You know exactly how much detail to provide before the questioner is satisfied and moves on. The returns, 10 to 17% annually. Every year, bull markets and bear markets alike. Booms and recessions. The dot-com crash. September 11th. None of it touches the performance numbers. While every other fund in America bounces violently with the market, yours is a flat line of prosperity. On Wall Street, there's a word for returns that don't correlate with reality. The word is impossible, but the clients don't say that word because they're making money, because they trust you, because you are the chairman of NASDAQ, and the chairman of NASDAQ does not run a fraud. The Fairfield Greenwich Group, run by Walter Noel and his globetrotting son-in-law Andres Pirojita, works the European wealthy like missionaries. Geneva, Zurich, Madrid, Palm Beach. They're getting a fee for every dollar they funnel into your fund, and they funnel billions. Eventually, they will deliver $7.2 billion. Tremont Group comes. Comad Securities. Individual accounts from hedge fund managers, from philanthropists, from the kind of money that has always assumed itself safe because it is sophisticated enough to ask the right questions before trusting. Elie Wiesel, the Nobel laureate, the Holocaust survivor who spent his life bearing witness to the worst of human nature, places $15.2 million of his foundation's assets with you. He trusts you. The New York Mets owner, Fred Wilpon, trusts you. HSBC, BNP Paribas, pension funds, retirees who gave you their entire savings because a neighbor told them you were the safest bet in America. They all trust you. And every statement you send them, every quarterly account report, every year-end document, every trade confirmation is a fabrication. Frank D. Pasquale has been with you since 1975. He runs the 17th floor's day-to-day operations with the precision of a foreman who has memorized the blueprint of a building that does not exist. The statements are generated to show positions in real stocks, in treasury bonds, in respectable instruments. The trades are backdated to show plausible entry and exit points. The tax documents are manufactured to match. The whole system hums in a loop. Money in, statements out, lies compounding on lies the way interest compounds on capital. At the peak, the account statements you send to clients total approximately $64.8 billion. $64.8 billion of a portfolio that does not exist, of trades that were never executed, of wealth that lives entirely in the paper and the servers on the 17th floor of a glass building in Midtown Manhattan. You sleep, you eat, you take your yacht out, the Bull, and later a larger one. The penthouse on East 64th Street and the house in Palm Beach and a property in the south of France. You and Ruth go to charity dinners. You write checks to philanthropies. You are a man of standing and generosity and community. And every morning, before any of that begins, there is the machine. The machine needs feeding. A Ponzi scheme has one law, and it is absolute. It requires more new capital than it pays out in existing obligations. The moment that equation inverts, the moment more is leaving than entering, the machine devours itself. So it cannot stop. It cannot shrink. It can only grow or collapse. You know this. On some level, in some part of the mind, you have learned to wall off from your daily life. You have always known this. But maybe the market turns. Maybe the inflows stay strong. Maybe you find a way to unwind it quietly over a decade, to engineer some kind of soft landing before anyone notices. Maybe is the most dangerous word in the English language, and you have been saying it to yourself for years. His name is Harry Markopolos. He is a portfolio manager and financial analyst from Boston, a former Army officer, precise, quiet, the kind of man who trusts arithmetic over charisma, which means he is exactly the wrong kind of man for you to exist near. In 1999, his firm asked him to reverse engineer your claimed investment strategy so they can replicate it for their own clients. He sits down with the numbers. He runs the math on the split strike conversion strategy. He models it against actual market data for the options you claim to be trading. He calculates the position sizes that your reported assets would require and arrives at a number larger than the total volume of that options market that actually exists. You cannot be doing what you say you're doing. The math is impossible. He submits a formal complaint to the Securities and Exchange Commission in May 2000. He has done the analysis. He has shown his work. He has outlined specifically, systematically, with the patience of a man who trusts that institutions exist for a reason, why the largest hedge fund in the world is almost certainly a fraud. The SEC reviews the submission. The SEC declines to act. He submits again in 2001. More detail, more evidence, a document laying out 19 red flags, any one of which should trigger an examination. The SEC reviews. The SEC declines to act. He submits again in 2005. His memo is titled simply, "The world's largest hedge fund is a fraud." The SEC reviews. The SEC declines to act. He submits again in 2008. You never know his name during most of these years. You are not running from Harry Markopolos specifically. You are running from the weight of the whole construction, from the quarterly statements, from the redemption requests, from the phone calls that could, at any random Tuesday, turn into the call that ends everything. But Markopolos is out there, screaming into the regulatory void. The void absorbs the scream, files it, and does nothing. And the machine keeps running. By 2005, the paranoia is no longer a visitor. It has moved in. It sits with you at dinner. It wakes you at 3 in the morning, and its first thought, before Ruth, before the city outside the windows, before coffee, is the number, the gap, the arithmetic of what you owe versus what exists. The distance between the lie and the moment it stops being sustainable. You have learned to move through the world with a mask so complete, so practiced over so many decades, that sometimes you wonder if there is anything underneath it anymore. But the mask is weight. You feel it at night. You feel it in the elevator. You feel it when journalists call the office, when the SEC sends examiners, when a sophisticated client starts asking sharper questions than usual. The SEC has examined your operation multiple times. You walk them through the floor with a composure that should have alarmed them, because no man with this much to hide should be this calm, and their failure to recognize that calculus is one of the great regulatory catastrophes of the modern era. But they leave. They always leave, and the machine runs. There are moments alone in the car, staring at the water from the Palm Beach house, in the silence after a charity event when everyone has gone home and it is just you and the weight of what you are, when the thought arrives. Stop. Call someone. Tell the truth. And then the thought does the math. The houses, the boats, the legacy. Your son's on the 18th floor, building legitimate careers, believing in the name above the door. Ruth, 50 years of marriage. The clients who trusted you with not just their money, but their safety, the deep animal comfort of believing someone was watching over what they had built their entire lives to accumulate. If you confess, all of it disintegrates. If you keep going, if the machine runs another quarter, maybe it all stabilizes. Maybe. September 2008. Lehman Brothers disappears. Not metaphorically, not a restructuring, not a bailout, not a dramatic weekend of negotiations that ends with a handshake. Lehman Brothers Holdings incorporated files for Chapter 11 on September 15, 2008, and the entire architecture of global credit, which has been built on assumptions that turned out to be as fabricated as anything on your 17th floor, begins to collapse in real time. The stock market drops, then drops again. Investors around the world, in a single synchronized act of panic, start demanding their money back from every fund, every vehicle, every structure they had assumed was safe. They want it back. They want it now. And your phone starts ringing. Fairfield Greenwich wants to redeem $7 billion. You have approximately $300 million in the account. $300 million against $7 billion in requests from one feeder fund alone. In the weeks that follow, more requests come in. The numbers pile up with the inexorability of a tide you cannot turn back with your hands. By the first week of December 2008, you have approximately $234 million left in the account. The total redemption requests you cannot honor are in the billions. You reach out to contacts carefully without showing your hand. Try to bring in new capital, try to buy one more quarter, one more month, one more week. There is nothing coming. The market has taken from you the one resource the machine could not operate without. Time, December 9th, 2008. The office Christmas party. You are there. You smile. You shake hands. You stand in a room full of people who have devoted their careers to your firm, who believe in what the name over the door represents, who have no idea that the floor below them has been a ghost for decades. You smile, and you go home, and the next morning you call your sons. December 10th, 2008, East 64th Street. Andrew and Mark sit across from you. You tell them that the investment advisory business is a fraud. You tell them it has always been a fraud. For years, for decades, for a period so long that neither of them can locate its beginning. You tell them you plan to turn yourself in, that you need a few days first to distribute the remaining funds to employees and family members to manage the transition. They listen, and then they do something you did not anticipate. They call a lawyer, and the lawyer calls the FBI. The next morning, December 11th, 2008, Special Agent Theodore Cassiapi and his partner knock on your door at the penthouse on East 64th Street. You answer it yourself, Cassiope asks if there is an innocent explanation for what has happened at Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities. You look at him the way you have looked at regulators and journalists and skeptical clients for 30 years. That steady, impenetrable gaze of a man who has never flinched. Then you say, there is no innocent explanation, and it is over. The numbers that emerge in the following weeks are not numbers that the human mind processes easily. Account statements sent to clients, approximately $64.8 billion. Actual principal, real money that real human beings handed you in trust, approximately $17 billion. Client accounts, roughly 4,900. Not institutional abstractions, not line items on a balance sheet. 4,900 accounts belonging to human beings. Foundations serving Holocaust survivors, charities funding cancer research, couples in their 70s who chose you because their neighbor said you were safe, because the chairman of NASDAQ was the safest bet they had ever heard of. Elie Wiesel's Foundation for Humanity, gone. The Pickauer Foundation, gone. Steven Spielberg's Wunderkinder Foundation, gone. Pension funds that ordinary people had paid into for 30 years. A woman in Florida who had been a client since the 1970s and had never once asked a question she didn't trust you to answer honestly. Irving Picard is appointed as trustee to recover assets for victims. He will spend the next 15 years clawing back funds from feeder fund managers who profited from banks that should have known better, from the wreckage of an empire that never actually existed. He will recover remarkable sums. He will not recover all of it. He cannot give back the years. He cannot give back the retirement that a couple in their late 70s will now never have. He cannot give back the feeling, the specific, irreplaceable American feeling of having worked your entire life and earned the right to feel financially safe. You stole that feeling from nearly 5,000 people, and no judge can sentence it back into existence. On June 29, 2009, you stand before the Honorable Denny Chin in the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York. The courtroom is full, not just with lawyers and reporters and cameras positioned outside, but with victims, a fraction of thousands who cannot all fit inside one room, who submitted impact statements that the court compiled that describe what it is to open a brokerage account statement and then discover over a single December week that everything on that statement was invented. You make a statement. You say you live in a tormented state. You say you knew what you were doing was wrong and criminal. You say, I'm sorry, and the words land in the room with the hollow weight of language that arrived too late to mean anything to the people it is addressed to. Judge Chin sentences you to 150 years in federal prison. Not a life sentence. 150 years. The symbolic arithmetic of a judge who wanted the number itself to communicate something. That the scale of what you did was beyond the ordinary language of punishment. That the court needed a figure as impossible as the fraud itself. You were 71 years old when the sentence is read. They take you to the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Lower Manhattan. Later, to the Federal Correctional Institution in Butner, North Carolina, a medium-security prison where you will spend the rest of your life among men whose crimes are measured in thousands, not billions. Your brother Peter, who served as the firm's chief compliance officer, pleads guilty to related charges. He receives 10 years. Ruth, your wife of nearly 50 years, the woman who stood beside you through every charity gala and every yacht trip and every lie you brought home at the end of every working day, eventually loses nearly everything the government can seize. The penthouse, Palm Beach, the boats, the life. She survives quietly in a world that will carry your name as long as she does. And then December 11th, 2010 arrives. Exactly 2 years after your arrest. Your son, Mark, 46 years old, a man who knew nothing, who turned you in because he believed doing so was the right thing to do, who spent 2 years living inside the destruction of your name while lawsuits and investigations and a permanent public association with your crime closed in from every direction. Mark takes his life in his apartment on Mercer Street in Manhattan. His 2-year-old son is asleep in the next room. He is gone, and there is no accounting for that. No restitution fund. No recovery proceeding. There is only the understanding, arriving in a federal correctional institution in Butner, North Carolina, that the machine you ran on the 17th floor took things you never put in the ledger. You die on April 14th, 2021. Butner, North Carolina. Federal Correctional Institution medium. Kidney disease. Age 82. 12 years into a 150-year sentence. You never leave. Your other son, Andrew, died of lymphoma in 2014. He was 48 years old. Both of your sons are gone before you. In 1960, you were a 22-year-old kid from Queens with $5,000 and a hunger that you told yourself was the clean American kind, the bootstrap kind, the kind that the country was built to reward. You were not wrong about that. You built something real and legitimate and genuinely remarkable. You helped design the electronic trading infrastructure that reshaped American markets. Your name was, for decades, synonymous with trust in an industry that runs entirely on trust. And then you made one choice. One afternoon, one quarter, one moment where the gap between what you'd promised and what the market could deliver was small enough that you told yourself you could bridge it quietly. And that choice never stopped compounding. $64.8 billion in phantom wealth. Nearly 5,000 families. A regulatory system that failed to stop you for almost a decade after being told exactly what you were. 2 sons. The largest Ponzi scheme in the history of the world, built not by an outsider who conned his way into the building, but by the man who helped lay the foundation. In 1993, you sat at the head of the NASDAQ. In 2009, you sat in a courtroom and heard a judge say 150 years. A kid from Queens with $5,000. That is all it ever was. That is all it took.